It's one thing to see it on television, but when it's happening in your own house.
Are you afraid of the dark? Are you scared?
Hi guys, it is the Ghost Rider. I have pink hair and a glass of wine. Now, today my paranormal group got sent a rather interesting message, and it's actually something that I've asked a few times on social media. This person messaged our page asking what to do because they thought that there could possibly be a spirit or an entity in their home. And I was like, yes, I love questions like this, oh my god. I'm here to tell you guys, what should you do if you think that you have a ghost? Now, you actually have a few options, and depending what sort of activity or what sort of phenomena you're experiencing, that might kind of alter which option you choose first. For example, in this person's case, it was mainly just sounds and footsteps and things like that. The very first thing that I would suggest that anyone does is to grab a notebook. And this is going to be your paranormal activity notebook. Hopefully you won't end up getting dragged down the stairs and locked in the laundry. So you need to record everything that is happening. Everything. Because it's one thing to simply remember something that happened. Oh yeah, you know, I think this thing happened last week, and you know, I think it was last night that the shelves in the kitchen flew open. And no, you need to write these things down. And when you're writing them down, you need to write exactly what happened, what day it was, kind of the aspects of what happened. So for example, if you're hearing footsteps, what room did it happen in? What time of night? What time of day? How loud were they? What did they sound like they were doing? Walking around in circles? Were they walking from one room to another? Things like that. If they start to happen regularly, you may be able to find that perhaps there's some kind of pattern. Perhaps it only happens on a Friday. Perhaps it only happens when there's someone in the house. Perhaps it only happens when your children are in the house, things like that. It can help you kind of get a grasp of what may possibly be the driving force behind what is making this phenomena happen. Not only that, but it can help you kind of decide whether or not the activity is possibly residual or intelligent. Residual activity is kind of, to put it generally, kind of like a replayed recording that is happening back to you. It is not something that you can communicate with. It's like a movie being played back. Under certain atmospheric conditions, this particular thing may happen. For example, the ghost of a girl in white being seen on the night of a full moon next to a road where she was picked up or hit by a car, and it only pops up under the night of the full moon. Now, the important difference between a residual haunting and an intelligent haunting is that it's just a replay. You can't talk to this thing, you can't reason with it, it's just something that happens. Now, an intelligent haunting is something that may possibly have some kind of, well, intelligence behind it, and it's something that you may possibly be able to communicate with. So the second thing that I would probably do if you think that you have any kind of paranormal activity in your house is to talk about it with whoever else lives in the house. If you live with your children, if you live with a partner, with roommates, just sit down. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the house. It can be outside of the house. It can be in a coffee shop. Just a safe place where you guys can talk about whether or not, you know, has your housemate heard or seen the same things as you? How does it make them feel? Were they scared? Something that happens for you may not necessarily happen the same time as it happens for them. Add that all into your notebook trusty handy dandy notebook, because especially with children, you see a lot on television and in movies of any kind of paranormal activity happening around children is usually really sinister, and a lot of the time it's just Hollywood trying to prey on this whole, oh, children are innocent, and when, like, the whole tension point of the movie is just, oh, we need to protect the child kind of thing. That's how they draw people in, because everyone cares for children kind of thing. Realistically, in the real world, from what I have experienced and what I have read and what I have seen and what I have heard of other people who specialize in this sort of thing, is that if there is a spirit hanging around a child or affecting a child, it's usually that of a loved one who's looking after them. It's usually nowhere near as sinister as Hollywood and television would make us believe that it is. However, that said, again, have a chat with your kid. You know, a lot of children are very open to the idea of spirits and ghosts and fairies and unicorns and things like that, and you'll probably find that they're actually a lot easier to speak to, and you can gauge how threatening this thing may be, whether or not it just makes them scared, or whether it is something that is stopping them from sleeping, or something that is making them scared to go into their room. But then you can also find out as well whether, a lot of the time, it could be night terrors or things like that, but we're going on the assumption that you've also experienced this paranormal activity. So yeah, definitely consult with the rest of the people who live in the house, so that way you're all on the same page, you're all sharing the same information, and you're all kind of gathering what you know and what you feel about what is happening. Now, the third thing that I would do is to research the house that you're living in, or the property that you're living in, or the region that you're living in, because it's not always as simple as, oh, the lady who lived in the house before you died and now she's walking around. There is, and especially in a lot of countries, obviously like Australia and America, there is a vast history of violent indigenous colonization, which obviously creates a lot of tension. That's the nice way to put it. Basically, your house may not necessarily be built on an Indian burial ground kind of thing. No, actually the best example that I've seen of this is, if anyone watches Kindred Spirits, which has got Adam and Amy from TAPS, the very first thing that Amy will do on a research day is she will research the history of the neighborhood and the house, and usually she'll use that and find leads. She'll see that, you know, a child disappeared in the woods maybe a block away from the house, and the activity is a little bit childlike. Try and use that to see if you could possibly get a suspect for what this thing may be inside your house, because that can help you relate a little bit, which we can later then use in, you know, step 4. Step 4, if you're up to it. Now, of course, you can just skip the first 4 steps and go straight to step 5, but step 4 is to actually communicate with this thing, or attempt to communicate with this thing. You can speak to it as a family if your children are perhaps not young and they won't be freaked out. And this can be as simple as, you know, if the activity is centered in the living room, you guys all sit down in the living room, you know, grab a cup of tea, things like that, and just have a chat. Introduce yourselves, explain a little something about yourselves, say, hey, you know, we've lived in this house for X amount of years, and we've noticed that, you know, every morning you'll walk up and down the stairs. And this can be used as, it's kind of like you're introducing yourself to someone at a party. Now, with intelligent hauntings, we usually find it easier to treat the person as, well, the spirit as a person. Think of them as like a surprise house guest. If you introduce yourself and say, hey, you know, when you stand in the hallway at 3 o'clock in the morning and my child gets up to go to the toilet, it really, really scares her. Because say if this is a spirit, then they may not necessarily know that they're actually scaring your child or they're scaring you. They may not be aware of the consequences of them simply just floating around your house doing things. However, at the same time, if you choose to kind of coexist with this thing, you want to give them boundaries. Just like any other house guest, just like any other housemate as well. You give them boundaries. It can be something like, all right, well, you are more than welcome to live in this house with us. We just have a few rules. One of those rules is no touching, no messing with electrical cords, no bothering my child, you know, no banging between the hours of 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., that kind of thing. Just approach it firmly, approach it as if you are talking to a housemate. If you've decided that you really don't want this thing in your house, which is perfectly valid, houses are for the living and the dead aren't necessarily supposed to be here with you. It's not everyone's slice of cake, so that's perfectly fine. You can skip straight to step 5, and step 5 would probably be to reach out to some power or some authority. So whether that is a priest, a medium, a shaman, anyone like that. I would probably give a warning to people who see paranormal groups advertising cleansings. Now, it's totally your choice if you want to invite someone into your home who claims that they can clean a spirit from your house. The only people, personally, that I believe who would have the power to cleanse someone from a house or move the spirit on would probably be someone indigenous who would do a smoking ceremony or something like that. But if you come across a paranormal group who is offering their services for money, please do not pay them. It is completely illegal and they should not be charging for this. It's completely illegal for people to charge you for paranormal services. I am telling you. In Australia, in New South Wales, I think in Australia as a whole, it's completely illegal and it's fraudulent. So please do not pay for this kind of thing. Aside from cleansing or blessings or moving on spirits from houses, you can also use mediums to communicate with whoever may be hanging around in your house. Now, if you're in Australia, you can go to a website called Access Paranormal. You can message a paranormal group on Facebook. We've got, most paranormal groups will have trusted mediums that they work with. For example, the person who messaged our page, I offered to point them in the direction of a medium that I trust, who actually had experience with hauntings that involved children as well. They're a little bit of cheating. They're like, personally, if it was me, I'd do my own investigation, but if you don't have any kind of background or if you don't really feel like it's something that you want to do yourself, then it's perfectly fine to grab a medium and see if they can grab a little bit more information. They might be able to give you information about how old the spirit is, where the spirit came from, what they want. Most of the time, once you say hi and just be like, oh yeah, you're a thing, you're there, the activity usually just drops off. So yeah. The last thing is perhaps it can be quite hard. And I know not a lot of people would probably agree with this sort of thing, but I would actually see a doctor. This is something that should always be done. So after you've done your research, or maybe whilst you're doing your research, whilst you're trying to do your communicating, whilst you're laying down your ground rules and things like that, see a doctor, because you don't know what may be going on inside your house. There may be a gas leak. Gas leaks can cause hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, visual hallucinations, things like that. All sorts of health problems that may possibly be making you think that you are experiencing something. And also, everyone should see a psychologist at least once in their lives. You see a doctor to check on your body, you see a psychologist to check on your brain. So, yeah. And if all else fails, you can always contact a paranormal group to come in. Again, they should not charge you. No paranormal group should ever charge you for anything, unless you're buying equipment off them or something like that, like if it's like a material thing. But paranormal groups should not charge you for services. So you can always grab a paranormal group to come in and poke around and see what they find out. But yeah, if anyone has ever experienced paranormal activity in their house, tell me, like, what did you guys do? Did you guys investigate it yourselves? Did you just kind of live with it? Or are you still like not quite sure what to do? Drop your replies in the comments and I will always read the comments. Whilst you're there, if you haven't already, click the subscribe button and make sure that you select the little bell so that you know when new videos are up. And I will talk to you guys later.